Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia, Simp Academia Edition, Chapter 360. Hey, hope you're having a great day. Hopefully this won't be too long of a video. I don't think it's too complicated of a chapter, so it doesn't need that much talking about it. But I say that, but then we might end up with 40 minutes. Anyway, hey everybody. Alright, so in terms of general notes, I think the thing that I'm most happy about is, of course, the stuff that happened with the powers. Everything pretty much went the way I thought it would when it came to the powers. It was actually very exciting reading the chapter. I may not be the best at understanding where exactly Horikoshi wants to take the story and the general flow of the battles, but at least when it comes to power logic, I still have some kind of a handle on the situation here. I was actually very happy to see, for instance, the Sun Eater stuff, and I was actually also very happy to see the stuff about Nejire coming true and the stuff about Mirio being more or less consistent. We didn't really get a quirk awakening kind of Deus Ex Machina happening. We actually got something that is very realistic according to the standards set within Hero Academia. I imagine the temptation must be relatively high for Horikoshi to go and upgrade Mirio's power set. But I feel like adhering to Mirio's general weakness and patheticness is actually really good. Just because you know what, Mirio isn't one of the main characters as much as like the story wants to say he is during his introduction arc. I think overall, if we're going to be giving out awakenings, I think Bakugo probably is more deserving of it. Of course, you could say like, well, it's cool if everyone gets awakenings, but it's like, given the circumstances and given the way UA works and given what the third years are supposed to represent, that being the pinnacle of quirk mastery, like Sun Eater represents this very well. I feel this is appropriate. Overall, the chapter is very appropriate. I'm gonna have a lot of fun talking about the powers here, because the most interesting thing happens actually with Mirio pretty much explaining his purpose in the battle, because that's where I think you see the most story tricks happening in order to justify it. So we'll get into it. Anyway, anything else to say for general notes? Not really. Everything will come out in the page-by-page walkthrough. So let's start that right now. The first page, this initial set of pages with Bakugo and Shigaraki, I think they were very good for the visceral sense of it. I think in terms of like the art, I think in terms of like the impact, these are probably very good pages. But otherwise, there's not a lot in terms of important details going on here. Not that I could see. So if you guys see anything, let me know down below. So on the first page, we just have the disrespect of Shigaraki just flat out manhandling Bakugo with his foot. That was really good. We have the setup for like, oh yeah, this is pretty okay. It's good that I don't have my quirks because like now you won't be destroyed to dust and like I can like parade your body around to Izuku. Honestly, good on Shigaraki for thinking of doing that. Now, first page shows that Bakugo is still willing to fight. Second page is probably the most impressive with the choreography. Bakugo getting lifted into the air. I think what the author did here was pretty cool. I want to see this animated. I really hope that the anime actually draws these panels out and gives them like a nice flow between panels and not does like some kind of slideshow on this, because like this is very dynamic. I like the idea of Shigaraki throwing Bakugo into the air, grabbing his neck and then alternating his foot and bringing it down to smash some of Bakugo's equipment. I thought that was a cool little bit of choreography, probably some of the most impressive we've seen in recent memory in terms of like just a very swift movement. Again, this is the kind of stuff I want to see animated, just because this is not a usual kind of progression that you see here. You've never seen a man with well, in Hero Academia, you haven't seen a man with this kind of dexterity in his toes. Now, I gotta say, I feel like this Shigaraki is more Shigaraki speaking, because like All For One doesn't use cuz, but that might also be like an English thing. But him referring to like the time that Bakugo said that he likes the way that All Might wins, that kind of stuff, that makes it feel like it's more Shigaraki speaking right now. So we continue the week to week discussion of who's who in Shigaraki's body, but probably like a little bit more of Shigaraki coming out here. Anyway, page 3 was probably like one of the strangest pages. It's still kind of one of the strangest pages. It was strange with the spoilers because you didn't have the context, but on this page, what you can really just read this as is Bakugo having a vision of terror of what could happen to him. Given that when you go to page 4, you have like Bakugo realizing something, or like probably just showing, oh yeah, this is in Bakugo's mind of what he thinks about to happen to him. It makes more sense. But going back to page 3, it does feel kind of out of place. At this point, it's kind of like a wasted page because it's pretty much, yo, let me draw this really grotesque scene. Let me show off how grotesque I can be, which props Horikoshi, super grotesque. But it doesn't really do much else unless Bakugo says that he had a moment where he understood something on a fundamental level. It's a cool visual, but the dialogue that goes on it, like, it kind of makes it a wasted page in the context of the chapter because the chapter has more interesting things going on. Okay, we go into page 4 and 5 officially, and we have Nejire coming in and using the pike. We also have another really great move from Shigaraki using Bakugo as pretty much a shield. I think that was amazing. Keep in mind the stuff about the pike. Keep in mind the stuff about Shigaraki's face still being damaged, because we're going to talk about it in a quick second. One of the most important things in the chapter is the mechanisms by which Shigaraki's body evolves, because something's a little bit funny here, and it's hard to tell whether or not it's funny because of the author's writing or if it's funny because of the author's intention. If it's because the author's writing, then it's an issue. If it's because the author's intending it to be this way, then that's where the more interesting conversation will be. So we go into page 6. The most important thing that I want you to keep in mind here is Nejire's control on that pike. The control is going to be very important. Given the speed that it approached with as well, that's going to be probably super important. Keep it in mind. On page 6, we also see on page 6, we also see Shigaraki doing a counterattack and also getting hit by the scorpion tails. We go on to page 7, where we see my favorite part. Well, not my favorite part. My favorite part's actually later, but like my favorite part in terms of being right. We actually see Sun Eater using the poison. So overall, I'm very happy with what the author did here, because this is a logical conclusion. He should have used the poison, and the poison should have been adapted out, because that's what it means to be constantly evolving. Now, here's where the things get interesting. The mechanism by which he got rid of the poison is extremely rudimentary and honestly is not that robust. The most impressive thing about this poison spitting mouth is that it was able to collect all the poison and eject it. However, this is not perfect evolution. This is not the most optimal evolution. And this is really important because on page 8, you go into my body continues to adapt. Now, here's where things get kind of screwy, because depending on how you interpret the word adapt, some logical ramifications become apparent. So going back on to page 6, for now, again, the issue here is that we don't know if the author has a certain interpretation of adaptation, or if the interpretation that he has here is purposeful and he's trying to give a small message about something. I still maintain that the best adaptation would have been his body just breaks down the poison naturally instead of physically ejecting it out of the body. It is more impressive to be able to develop an antidote within your body than it is to just remove it from the body. Mind you, like, it depends on how, like, it actually depends on how you want to, like, argue this, because you could argue that collecting all the poison in one spot and be able to spit it out is also really impressive. I feel it's more mechanical. I feel like you go into a more chemical kind of basis if you try and do and synthesize an entirely new compound, but you know the arguments could be had. Anyway, I don't think the adaptation mechanism is perfect, given that we're not getting the antidote production within the body, but also the issue here is Shigaraki's body is still damaged. His face is still damaged. I'm not sure how that factors in to a body that continues to adapt. Because personally, I think if you had a fully perfect body that's able to generate new cells and is able to always adapt to anything, I feel like it should have adapted out the damage if you are taking this power to its most logical conclusion. Given that he's doing like incredible cell division, I think his skin should have repaired itself. And like then, like the way to argue this too is like to look at it and it'd be like, well, does Shigaraki's body see the damaged skin as something that needs to be adapted out, as something that needs to be repaired? Well, right now we can't see the pupil in his eye. So does he have vision out of that eye? The point is, ignoring super regen, given that he's generating new cells at the rate he is, his body shouldn't be impaired by anything. So this might be a little indicative of the fact that this adaptation mechanism isn't all powerful, which is really good for the characters. Yeah, honestly, Shigaraki should have grown new skin already. That skin should have been replaced already. if we're going into a body that continues to adapt. Although again, like it all depends on how you want to take the word adapt here, or how you want to take the word evolve. It ultimately comes down to the question, can a being that's always evolving incur damage and keep damage? Is an evolved being a damaged being? Is that allowable? Like, you know, that's kind of like the philosophical question you have to go in with there. But it opens up the door for the evolution process itself not being the most perfect thing. Right now, like, we have a lot of reason to believe it's not the most perfect thing, and it's actually it's much more mechanical. Anyway, on page 9, you have like probably the most weird thing, that being the fact that Mirio could snatch Bakugo out of Shigaraki's grip. I feel like if you are a man with the power of All Might, I feel like your grip should be a little bit tighter. I think it would have been nice if the author showed like pieces of Bakugo's costume being ripped apart, but like Shigaraki also had a grip on Bakugo's neck, enough that he could hold him up, right? So probably this is the most impressive thing that Mirio did here. That being, he was able to snatch Shigaraki, or so, that being, he was able to snatch Bakugo out of Shigaraki's clutches. Very interesting. I also gotta say, you know, we talked about it on the live streams, but Shigaraki's faces for Mirio are like some of the best here. And now we're going into page 10 and 11 where we have Mirio doing stuff. So I gotta say first, like the real reason you want to have Mirio here is because you want to see Shigaraki's attacks invalidated. Like, it is cool to see a hand monster passing through Mirio and Mirio not caring. Like, the non-enthused expressions from both of them are pretty choice in these chapters. Alright, so page 10. Page 10 is a giant justification as to why Mirio wasn't here earlier. And it's also a giant justification as the whole thing about the messenger bodyguard from the previous chapter that I did not mention because I missed it in the previous chapter. So Mirio's just explaining what he was doing. Alright, fair enough. The reason you know that this is something the author felt he had to justify is because there is no reason for, after Mirio saying the names Lemillion, for him to go on and explain the intricacies of what he was assigned to do. Like, I cannot express how redundant this is. The man goes, the name's Lemillion, I'm the hero on messenger and bodyguard duty. Now, right below that, after talking a little bit more and explaining what it means to be a messenger and a bodyguard, he goes on, they needed someone quick and mobile, and that's me. He introduced himself twice and restated what he is, like, more than once. This is extremely redundant. This is just 100% the author's hand here, just being like, guys, this is why Mirio wasn't there before. Again, I appreciate it. I don't think you had to go in for that extra little bit of justifying why Mirio's doing what he's doing. I think he's doing that because he knows that, or to some degree, he felt like this was a little bit finicky, because maybe there's other people that can do it. It's a school where there's, 6 hero courses, which we can assume have 20 students each. It is a little bit silly to think that Mirio is the only person that could probably do this job. Actually, it might not be silly. It depends on how you look at it. But whatever, doesn't matter. Mirio has to be here. This is the author's justification for it. He's really trying to make sure he dots his I's and crosses his T's. Appreciated. It's unfortunate because it just makes the dialogue look really redundant. The actual more interesting part is where Mirio starts talking about, like, why do you destroy stuff, Shigaraki? Because I love him just saying you've never had any friends. I'm pretty sure that hit deep inside of All For One, because this is more true to All For One than it is Shigaraki. Because Shigaraki has friends, and I mentioned this in the spoiler video, but Shigaraki has already made allowances for not destroying the things that his friends like. Also, it's funny that, you know, you're talking about destroying stuff, but All For One does not want everything destroyed. So this is where you can actually tell it's more Shigaraki speaking here. He's talking about the current framework has failed, and it's like, nah, it hasn't failed. Like, well, see, the thing with the villains is that they think everything has to be perfect, or everything has to go from 0 to 100 in an instant. That's not how things work. People have to constantly learn whenever they encounter new phenomena. But this is just like that's just how the villains and their like brain dead, like man-child level education kind of like put things together. I think I just covered the thing about you've never had any friends. Now this page, or 10 and 11, are the pages that have the most interesting thing, that being the power logic. I'm so happy that the translation ended up using words that I would have used. The most critical line here when we start to dissect this is, I can get in close, sure, but on my own I can't deal hard-hitting damage. That's why I gotta escort Hado's energy waves to point-blank range. Okay. That's really good. Because that's what I was saying. Haru's the only one that actually has any way of actually hurting Shigaraki. So this is good because the author is on the same page. I'm happy, feel really good about that. But here's where things get kind of tricky. It all depends on whether or not you believe that Mirio is actually worthwhile here. Because the author has to paint the illusion that Mirio is worthwhile. But when you look at this, it depends on how you interpret Haru's power. Because Mirio is pretty much saying that I am a missile guidance system. My question is, does Haru need her spirals to be guided? How much control does she have? The big thing with Haru's power, and I looked up the wiki just to make sure, is that it might be a little bit slow with the way it moves. But given what we saw in this chapter, it doesn't seem like it's very slow. She was able to move it out of the way before hitting Bakugo, and it seemed like it was going relatively fast because of the way everything else in the panel was moving. My big thing here is, if you are someone who is trying to argue that Mirio is useless, what you would be looking at is whether or not Mirio is actually needed to be the one guiding Haru's power. I don't think it's an issue of control. I think Haru, the only thing that can stop her is speed. But given how quickly that thing comes in, I don't think speed's a factor. I think Haru, if she really wanted to, she could guide that power directly to Shigaraki by herself. I think we've seen many instances where she has incredible control of that power, and I think the only reason this is being established here right now is because Mirio needs to do something. The other thing is, you can't say Haru doesn't have control. The fact that she's able to wrap that power around Mirio's arm while he is in movement, high speed movement, indicates that there is an extreme degree of control. Now, with the situation here, the other thing you have to say is well, did the power catch up to Mirio while he was moving? But he was moving backwards, so he might have been trying to get closer to where Nejire was. But then when you also see the trail by which this power went, the speed that it had to cross all that distance and get to Mirio, really interesting. Now, the other thing you could say is thing is here, Haru's power might get blocked by Shigaraki, so therefore you need Mirio to guide it in. Well, sort of, but it comes back to, again, if Haru is able to concentrate the power along Mirio's arm and she's able to keep it along Mirio's arm while he is moving, is she not therefore controlling the power? Now, mind you, it's going to be a little bit harder if she actually has to drive it all the way through. But, you can see it in the panel that it reaches Mirio. It's able to reach Mirio. Fundamentally, the power has a lot of speed. Fundamentally, it has a lot of control. One of the ways that you could kind of argue this is that the power has an auto-lock feature, where specifically when it revolves around something, it sticks there by itself, and therefore Haru doesn't need to control the power anymore with her mind. The other issue here, though, is Mirio's approaching Shigaraki by phasing through all his stuff. But if the power is revolving around Mirio's arm, does Mirio's arm need to stay solid for the power to revolve around it? That's the other big issue there. And then if you say, well, no, Mirio's able to just go intangible, then it's then in that case, Haru is still revolving the power around Mirio's arm because there's no solid base for which it to revolve around. So overall, the power logic here, depending on how hard you want to argue this, can get kind of screwy, because you have to make a few assumptions about Haru's incapabilities. And the other big issue here is that there is a plot-related reason as to why Mirio has to be the missile guidance system, because he can't do anything else. He is useless otherwise. That's why the author has to sell you on the illusion. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it would be silly to get caught up on this detail, because in the grand scheme of things, the author just needs Mirio to be useful. This is going to happen regardless. And you're probably going to see many points where Haru's control will probably contradict the idea that she needed Mirio's help, that he needed to be the one to escort the power in there, given her capabilities so far. But in the grand scheme of things, just let the man do it. He just wants to show Mirio being useful. There's a lot of little wrinkles and details that are fun to poke at, but at the end of the day, Mirio's useless otherwise, and the author knows it. He even has him say it right here. But yeah, overall, given the situation, I think it was a novel idea. I think what really helps it is the fact that we don't know all the properties of Haru's energy type, which is a good thing for the author because he can make up new things when he needs to. I think it's a finicky thing, but overall, I'm happy to see that Hado being the go-to energy was a correct assumption to make in the previous video, and ultimately it gives us a nice bit of choreography on page 12. Anyway, Mirio's final bit of dialogue about there's plenty worth keeping around. See, Tenko Shigaraki, or like, Tamura Shigaraki, sorry. Shigaraki already knows that, because he's already made the allowances for it. That line is really more made for All For One, who, like, says he has friends and then has to, like, double back when Dobby calls him out on the fact that he doesn't have friends, right? Like, that line's for All For One. I really hope it bothers him. Anyway, we go into the final pages of Bakugo. Now, these pages 12 and 13, they aren't super important, other than Bakugo is kind of like he's crying and all that kind of stuff. And that Best Jeanist is pretty much saying, like, all right, man, like, we were exploiting your previous encounters with Shigaraki. I don't know what they thought they were going to get out of that. But pretty much that's like a little bit of a line just saying, like, okay, this is why you were out here. You did great. We don't need you out here anymore. Like, you've done enough. The more interesting part comes in page 14, where you see Bakugo saying right side faint finger. I thought that was really neat. I think for this one, because he's saying faint, I don't think Shigaraki faints in this situation. Given that, I believe that what you're seeing here is more that Bakugo is imagining himself in the battle. And then you have Best Jeanist saying, like, despite everything, he's still, and the idea is he still hasn't given up. He's still fighting. On this page, you also see Bakugo and those, like, the shape of his explosions. Given that it's happening around his face, I think all his sweat glands are producing nitroglycerin or whatever he uses to explode the sweat with. That's what I think's happening. There's no other reason to have those little explosion marks anywhere else. So I think he's about to have a super hardcore quirk evolution. I think he's going to be squeezing explosions out of every single sweat gland, which will be incredible. He'll actually be doing a lot of damage. I really want to see them try and compress Bakugo's explosion or keep it in one place, though. Overall, though, the Bakugo stuff is going to be interesting. I can't wait to see what it comes out looking like. I want to see if it's actually going to be a quirk awakening. But otherwise, it's a pretty simple chapter. Let's see. Yeah, 20 minutes. That's pretty good because I have to go. Overall, I'm excited for the future. I want to see what's going to happen here. I'm thinking we'll have one more chapter of this battle. I really don't know. I wonder if the next chapter will be Bakugo's big moment. One thing I want to say too is that, like, when Mirio's fighting Shigaraki, it makes it look like this is a big mess of things. But when you look at it from the distance, I feel like I can see Mirio right there. It doesn't actually look like it's actually a big mess of fingers. Like, I can see the UA building in the background. Like, Shigaraki actually isn't making that big of a battlefield. So I'm not sure how much hands there actually are here. It's kind of odd. This isn't, like, what Bakugo is seeing. It does not look like what Mirio's inside of, in this panel. Any hoosers, that's it for me. Very quick chapter review. I got nothing else to say. Yeah, guys, let me know what you thought down below. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time.